All right, let's just dive right in. I want to talk about a question that I think is on a lot of our minds lately. With these unbelievably powerful AI tools everywhere, are we actually getting smarter, or is there a hidden cost we're not thinking about?
You know this feeling, right? You're staring at the blank page and that little blinking cursor is just mocking you. You've got to write a report, you have to solve some problem, come up with an idea, and you are just stuck. So what do? You turn to an AI and boom, in seconds you have this perfect, polished answer. It feels so efficient. It feels pretty smart.
But what if that feeling is just an illusion? What if the amazing convenience of getting an instant answer is actually stopping us from building the mental muscle we need to, think for ourselves?
Now, this isn't just some philosophical debate. There's real science looking into what's actually happening inside our heads when we outsource our thinking. And honestly, the findings are pretty eye-opening.
So check this out. A team of researchers over at MIT ran this fascinating study. They wanted to see in real time what our brains actually look like when we use different tools to help us write. The whole setup was pretty simple, but what they found was anything but.
So to figure this out, they hooked people up to EEGs to measure their brain activity while they were writing. And the results? They were crystal clear. The group that was just using their own brain showed the highest level of activity. I mean, they were firing on all cylinders. The group using Google, they were kind of in the middle. But the AI group, their brain activity was way, way lower. It's like their brains were basically on cruise control.
And it got even deeper than just what was happening in the moment. The AI group also showed weaker connections between different parts of the brain. And get this, they had the worst memory of what they'd actually written. But the most alarming part, this weaker neural wiring actually stuck around even after they stopped using the AI. The researchers had a specific name for this phenomenon.
They called it cognitive debt. And it's the perfect term for it, right? It's like taking out a loan. You get the convenience of an answer right now, but you pay for it later with interest. And that interest is your own mental sharpness. You're borrowing the thinking, but you're paying it back with your own cognitive ability. So the big question is, why? Why does this happen? Why does making things easier for ourselves right now make us weaker in the long run? Well, it all comes down to the fundamental way that we learn anything.
Think about learning to tie your shoelaces as a kid. It's a clumsy, frustrating process, right? You watch someone, you try it, you fail, you make a mess of it, and you try again. Every single attempt, every failure is your brain literally forging and strengthening new connections. It is the struggle itself that builds the skill, until one day, you don't even have to think about it. AI just completely bypasses that entire process. It doesn't guide you through the frustrating but absolutely essential steps of learning. No, it just hands you the perfectly tied shoe. You get the final result without any of the struggle, which means the deep learning never actually happens in your brain.
And this isn't a totally new problem. We've seen this movie before. Think about GPS. Before smartphones, we used maps. We had to actively plan our routes, engage our spatial memory. Now, we just passively follow a dot on a screen. And sure enough, studies have shown that people who rely heavily on GPS actually do worse on orientation tests. Their spatial memory muscle just starts to atrophy. AI is just a much, much more powerful version of that exact same effect.
Okay, I know, this might sound a little bit grim. But the answer here is not to just throw away AI and go live in the woods. The key is to completely shift how we think about and how we use these tools.
We have to stop seeing AI as this sort of vending machine for answers and start treating it like a personal coach or maybe a sparring partner, a tool that challenges our thinking instead of just replacing it.
The goal is to make a shift, right? From being a passive operator who just pushes a button and takes whatever comes out, to being an active conductor. A conductor has a vision. They use the whole orchestra, in this case the AI, to bring their own ideas to life, directing every single part to achieve a very specific goal. So how do we actually do that? How do you become a conductor? Well, the good news is there are some really concrete strategies you can start using right now to turn AI into a tool for mental fitness, not mental laziness. Think of it like a 4-part workout plan for your brain. First, and this is huge, do it yourself first. Always start with your own brain power. Second, use the AI as a devil's advocate to challenge your own arguments. Third, have it generate practice problems to sharpen your skills. And fourth, this is the big one that ties it all together, always be the conductor, not the operator. Let's walk through what that actually looks like. So strategy number 1 is the most fundamental. Do it yourself. Before you even think about asking the AI for anything, do the hard work. Write your own draft, formulate your own explanation, build your own plan. Then you bring in the AI. And this is where strategy number 2 comes in. Use AI as a devil's advocate. Don't just ask it to make your writing sound better. Ask it to critique your work, to find the flaws in your logic, to argue the other side. This forces you to defend your ideas and really deepens your own understanding. You're still doing all the heavy cognitive lifting.
And this right here perfectly illustrates that fourth principle, being the conductor. An operator gives a really vague prompt like code me a social media app. They're just outsourcing all the expertise. But a conductor, they've already done the thinking. They've designed the architecture. They've planned out the database. They're just using the AI as a hyper-efficient tool to execute their own detailed plan. And with that mindset, you unlock strategy number 3. A conductor doesn't just ask AI to build something. They ask it to teach. They might say, okay, based on this architecture I designed, generate 5 tough practice problems that will test my understanding of its limitations. See the difference? One is passive, the other is active, directed learning.
Ultimately, this all comes down to just reframing how we think about thinking. For centuries, we've tried to make everything more convenient. But when it comes to learning, the effort, that friction, the struggle, that's not a bug. That's the entire feature.
That feeling of frustration when you're wrestling with a tough problem, and that incredible feeling of triumph when you finally crack it yourself, that whole process is what builds real cognitive resilience. It's what makes our thinking original, valuable, and frankly, hard to replace.
So here's a final thought I want to leave you with. The next time you get an answer from an AI and it feels almost magically easy, just pause for a second. Ask yourself, what part of that did I really think about? And if the honest answer is not much, you might have just made another payment into your cognitive debt. The choice of whether you use these amazing tools as a crutch or as a coach is completely up to you.